So I'm just going to import that training demo project. So I just click on open, I go to downloads, and here it is, the training demo project. I'll just open it in the new window, right? So now that project is imported in IntelliJ, which is the editor that I'm using, right? As you can see, there is a POM file. So this is basically nothing but the Maven file, which is used to manage all your dependencies or the libraries that your microservice is going to be using. As you can see, this is the only library that we had added as part of when we were selecting the libraries on the start.spring.io. And this was the only library which is the Spring Boot Starter Web. So we had selected Spring Web. Basically, the name of the library is Spring Boot Starter Web. And this allows us to not just bootstrap the application, but also expose REST endpoints, right? And along with this, we'll keep adding more and more libraries as we go. There's also this test library because you will be writing test cases. We will try to do as much of a test-driven development as we can possibly can on this particular training, right? So this comes for free. You do not even have to add it when you are selecting the libraries on star.spring.io, right? I think for now, this information should be enough. Let's move to the SRC folder, and you'll see both main and test folders. Test, as the name implies, will have all the test cases that we will write in this particular project, right? And if I just expand Maven, you will see both Java and resources folder, right? So resources folder is where we will, as the name mentions, we will have all our resources which the project or the microservices might need. For example, any configuration that needs to go into this particular application, we will have those configurations in this application properties file, and we'll add more and more properties file per environments as we go along, right? If there are any templates to refer to, or if there is anything else like some files, some images that we want to refer back in our code, all of that static stuff will actually come and sit under the resources folder, right? And the Java is where the actual code is going to be written, right? All our Java files, whether they are controller layer files, whether they are service layer, whether they are repository layers, and we'll talk about each of these layers in a moment. All of these files will come as packages inside this Java folder, right? So as you can see, this as at this point, this is the only class that exists, and this is the starting class for a Spring Boot application, right? When you start a Spring Boot application, it will come and look for a file which basically has the public static and void and main function in it. So, and it has the Spring Boot annotation as well, and we'll talk about annotations in a different video. But to be able to just start this and see, I just have to click this button over here at the top right corner, and this is how we can easily start a Spring Boot application. And it's up and running in my local laptop right now, right? And just to take this example a little bit further, as we spoke, right, we would want to actually create a endpoint, a REST endpoint, which can be exposed and shared with a different team if we have to, right? I'll just go and create a new class called training controller, right? And I'll just create this class called training controller, and I will just put a annotation called REST controller. So basically, we are trying to tell Spring Boot that this particular class will have a few REST annotations, which will basically tell Spring Boot that this has some REST endpoints which need to be exposed, right? And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add another annotation. And like I said, don't worry about these things if you don't know at this point. They will get understood in future videos. The idea here is just to give you a feel of what it is to basically write a REST endpoint in a Spring Boot application, right? So I just added another annotation called get mapping, which basically tells Spring Boot that this is a get endpoint, right? And there are different HTTP methods available for us to create REST endpoints. and we'll talk about the HTTP method as well. But for now, get endpoint is something that does not expect anything as an input and just has a URL. You can just call the URL and it gives back a response, right? So just to define the functionality of this endpoint, the first Hello World API that we are trying to create, right? And I'll just call this function as hello. It has a string return type, so we want to return a static response as well, right? So I will just say return hello world, right? And this is as simple as that. We've just created the very first REST endpoint. It's static, it doesn't serve any business purpose for that matter, but it still is a REST endpoint, right? So I'll just restart this service so that it recompiles and takes the changes that we've just added, right? And you see it started very fast. And now I will go to the browser